Hey, what's going on YouTube, and welcome to another Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today, I'm going to be covering support Maokai, the Twisted Treant.
The Isles will bloom again.
So why exactly would you want to pick up Maokai's support, besides the fact that he's pretty busted? Well, first here, he has amazing brush control. He can toss his saplings in those brushes, they will become even more overpowered, and do a ton of damage. Those champions that just kind of like to lurk in the brush poking you, well, against a Maokai, you're not going to really be able to do that. He's got pretty decent damage and a really strong engage. Both his ultimate and his W can hold you in place, which will usually be enough to get a kill on a squishy target. He can then even use this ultimate as a way to disengage if his team is caught out in a bad position. And his last pro here is his built-in sustain. He doesn't have a ton, but his passive will add some lane sustain, so it's going to be at least a bit harder to push him out of the lane. This sustain, however, only works for himself, and he offers his AD carry none at all. If you're against a very poke-heavy lineup and your AD carry is not good at dodging, well, the lane is going to be a very big issue. Next, you actually need the brush to do your high damage. Even after the nerf to his E ability, this is where most of his damage comes from, and if there's no brush around, they won't be empowered, and they're not going to do a ton. Either way, he's a pretty strong support champion, and really fun to play. For your Masteries, you want to go 18 Cunning and 12 Resolve, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as your Keystone Mastery. This Keystone can be easily procced from your E ability, and as long as you get those empowered saplings onto the enemies, they're going to do a massive amount of damage. As for the rest of your Masteries, you pretty much just want to focus on increasing your sustain as much as possible, and your tankiness. You could always go for a really tanky Maokai as well and get Courage of the Colossus as your keystone instead, but honestly, Thunderlord's Decree is way too easy to proc on him, adds some really solid damage, and I take it all the time. For your runes, you'll want to go for Magic Penetration Reds, Armor Yellows, Magic Resist Blues, and Ability Power Quints. If you're against a really easy lane opponent, then you could go for Glyphs of Scaling Cooldown Reduction as well to pick some up, but honestly, I like to just stick with Magic Resist. You'll then want to make sure you get those Magic Penetration Reds and Ability Power Quints to maximize your damage and make your saplings hit pretty damn hard. Even though they were nerfed a bit, they still hit like a truck. Then, of course, I like to take the Armor and Magic Resist just to be a little bit more durable in the lane so I don't take a massive amount of poke damage. For your first Summoner spell, you'll want to pick up Flash. You're a fairly immobile champion, and you can use Flash throughout the game to save your life. You can also combine it with your Twisted Advance to pick off a target from a pretty long range. My second favorite summoner spell on Maokai is Ignite. This is great for adding some extra kill pressure into the lane and can sometimes get the lane snowballing. It's also really strong against champions who abuse healing like Swain or Soraka. Now Exhaust is also a really solid option if you are against some high damage carries like Tryndamere, Vayne, Draven, or one of the many other ones. Usually I'll take Ignite, but if I feel like I really need the Exhaust, I will pick that instead. Your passive ability is Sap Magic, and this will give you some pretty decent sustain. Each time Maokai casts an ability or is struck by an enemy's ability, Sap Magic's cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds. Periodically, Maokai's next basic attack after a 0.25 second delay against a non-structure heals him for between 10 and 130 based on level, plus 4.5% to 10.5% based on level, maximum health. Sap Magic will not heal if he's above 95% maximum health. So this passive is pretty decent because you're going to have at least some lane sustain. This also scales with your maximum health, and we're going to get items like a Liandry, so we're going to have a pretty decent health pool, and it's going to heal for quite a bit. To use this ability, just make sure you're paying attention to the cooldown. It is pretty long unless you're getting hit or hitting a lot, so just use it whenever you can. Your Q ability is Bramble Smash, and this does some pretty decent damage and also has a knockback. When activated, after a 0.35 second delay, Maokai releases an Arcane Shockwave that travels forth in a line, dealing magic damage to all enemies it passes through and slowing them by 99% for 0.25 seconds. Enemies near Maokai are also knocked back. So this is a pretty solid ability, and the cooldown was reduced in this patch, which makes it great for top lane and jungle. In the support role, however, I'll still max this one last. We still want to make sure we get an early point in this ability, however, because the knockback is pretty decent and you can knock people into your team, which can give them some really good kill potential. Other than that, like I said, just make sure you save this one for last. Your W ability is Twisted Advance, and this is a really solid single target crowd control. When activated, Maokai dashes to the target enemy, becoming untargetable for the duration, dealing magic damage on arrival, and briefly rooting them. The root duration does scale, although not by much, but you will definitely want to put points into it. In short, this is the ability you're going to be using for hard engaging onto a single target. You could then even use your ultimate to chain crowd control as well and hold a target in a place for a pretty long duration. After you root a target, you'll then want to follow up with your Q ability to knock them towards your team. Just this duration of crowd control can sometimes be enough time to get your team a kill if the target is squishy. Your E ability is Sapling Toss, and this is still going to be your main source of damage in the lane phase. When activated, Maokai flings a sapling in the target location, remaining there for 30 seconds and granting sight. Upon spotting an enemy, the sapling chases them for 2.5 seconds, exploding upon impact at the end of its duration, dealing magic damage to all nearby enemies upon detonation, capped at 300 against non-champions, and slowing them by 35% for 2 seconds. Saplings placed in brush gain increased duration and deals double damage over 2 seconds. This is a really solid ability that does percent max health damage, so it's really strong against tanky support champions as well. You'll want to try tossing these into the side brush so they chase the enemy champion and deal a massive amount of damage. You can also toss this into the river brush as well. In case a gank does come in, they will take a lot of damage and be slowed. Finally, this is also really solid for checking brushes. You're not going to have to face check ever as a Maokai. Your ultimate is Nature's Grasp, and this is a pretty solid AoE crowd control that does some pretty good damage. When activated, Maokai summons a colossal wall of 5 thorny brambles that slowly advances forward, each stopping at the first enemy champion they collide with. Each thorny bramble deals magic damage and roots for between 0.6 and 2.4 based on distance traveled seconds. Now this ultimate is incredibly slow, but in the right situations, it can be pretty devastating. If you can get some teamfights into some choke points where it's very hard to dodge this ability, it can be pretty devastating. Now you can also engage onto the enemy champion with your W ability, follow it up with your Q, and then this ability to chain crowd control and hold them in place for a very long duration. The route, however, is not going to be very long because you're going to be very close to the enemy. Either way, you can use this either on single targets to chain crowd control, or in team fights to sweep through an entire enemy team. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. Then, as support Maokai, you'll want to max your E ability first because it gives you some really good lane presence and can dish out a lot of damage. Absolutely nobody will be able to contest the brush. You'll then want to focus on maxing your W ability because it does have a scaling root duration, which is obviously really strong on an engaging support champion. Then finally, although it is a really strong ability, we max our Q last. Just make sure you take an early point in the ability at level 3 so you can knock back the target. Other than that, save it for last. Now let's look at a couple AD carry synergies, and first up is Draven. Draven's a champion that does a lot of damage, and you can hold them in place for him to pretty much two-shot. If somebody does manage to get on top of Draven, you can use either your ultimate, your W, or your Q ability to easily get them off of him. In the lane phase, your sapling toss combined with his spinning axes is going to be very hard damage to deal with. Next here we have Misfortune, and she's really strong with Maokai because your ultimates together are pretty ridiculous. You will hopefully be able to hold multiple targets in an area, and she will just be able to ultimate on top of them, and pretty much shred through all of them with her lethality and Black Cleaver build. In the lane phase, you're going to be pretty annoying to deal with because they can't go to the brush because of your saplings, and they can't go near minions because of her bounced Q shot. Last here I have Twitch, and you guys are pretty strong because Twitch does require a lot of peeling to get off his full damage, and you can provide him with a lot of peeling. Then, whenever you go for your W ability, he'll be able to drop his W on top, get off a bunch of auto attacks, and then E, doing a bunch of burst damage. Just focus on peeling for him as much as you can, and then watch him do the rest. During the lane phase, you want to use your sapling toss to take control of the brush in the lane. This can really affect poke-heavy champions that like to sit in the side brush like Zyra and Karma. Next, you'll want to look for good opportunities to initiate onto the enemy with your Twisted Advance. Try and wait until either the enemy has abilities in cooldown or you've poked them down already and then engage. With your AD carry's damage, you'll have a lot of kill potential. After you engage onto the enemy, make sure you use your Arcane Smash to knock them back towards your team for even more kill pressure. Before a team fight, you'll want to use your sapling toss to get some saplings in the brush around your team so you can look for flanks. It's a great way to stop the enemy catching you off guard and do some really nice damage at the same time. A lot of the team fight is then about finding an ideal time to use your Nature's Grasp. Try to use it through a team fight so you can hit multiple targets. It's a very slow ability, so try and engage with your Twisted Advance beforehand so you're guaranteed to hit at least that target. You'll also want to make sure that you're using your Twisted Advance and Arcane Smash to help peel the enemies off your carries when they do get on top of them. Now I'm going to cover a couple hard matchups, and first up is Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank's going to be a pretty hard matchup for you because you are rather squishy as a support Maokai. If he can grab either you or your AD carry, you're pretty much dead. All you have to do against him is make sure that you hide behind minions so he can't grab you and take control of the brush with your saplings. He's going to be a lot easier to deal with when he's not unseen in the brush trying to go for grabs. Next here, I've got Janna. Her shields are obviously pretty strong, and even if she goes near brush and she gets hit by the sapling, she's going to be able to soak most of the damage. The main reason she is so hard for you though is in teamfights. You're pretty much just sitting there looking for opportunities to engage with your ultimate, and even if you do get a good engagement off, she's just going to push you away with her ultimate after your team engages. If you engage onto one of her allies, she can stop you with her Q ability and then slow you with her W. And last here, I've got Sona. Sona's one of the champions that can poke you all day long with her Q ability, and it's going to be very hard for you to deal with. If you end up getting some damage onto her, she's just going to heal it back up with her W. You'll want to play a lot more passively, just take control of the brush and try to make it through the lane phase. You are, however, a pretty decent team fighter, so try to make it to that stage of the game and then go from there. Alright, now let's finish this off with the item build, which starts with a Spell Thief's Edge, health potions, and a warding totem. For your core build, you want to go for Eye of the Watchers and a Liandry's. Since you are an AP champion, you go for Eye of the Watchers to increase your damage potential, and that bonus gold is easy to proc with your E ability because it hits multiple times. You then want to go for Liandry's because you're going to be a tank destroyer with that percent health on your E ability and the burn that this provides as well. Even tanks are going to take some pretty high damage against a Maokai. For your boot options, you have Ionian Boots for 10% CDR, Sork Shoes for magic penetration, Merc Treads against high AP and CC heavy teams, and Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams. Now for your item pool, you first have the traditional support items, although I don't pick them up too much myself. Either way, as a support, Redemption is pretty strong because that heal is pretty busted right now. It's going to give you some really strong sustain in team fights and allow you to take stuff like Baron and whatnot even if your team is low. Now for the same reasons, you could also take the Locket. It's obviously not a heal, but that AoE shield can add an absolute ton of tankiness on your entire team. If you have a pretty decent carry on your team, then you could also go for a Knight's Vow. This will add some pretty nice tankiness and a bunch of other nice stats, but I wouldn't pick it up unless you have somebody you can count on. Now the second half here are the items I usually go for. First, the Morellonomicon, which is great because you'll get 20% CDR and that Grievous Wound, which are both fantastic in teamfights. If you want to add a big chunk of burst damage and have some nice mobility, you could also go for the Luden's Echo. Then, of course, as the AP champion you are, you could go for a Void Staff as well if there is a bunch of magic resist on the enemy team. If you need a chunk of magic resist, you could also go for the Spirit Visage. This item works great on Maokai because your passive healing is of course affected by it. Of course, as well, if you want to go for a pretty tanky Maokai, you could get any of the armor items as well. For my normal build, I'll take that core build, add the Sork Shoes, Void Staff, Morellonomicon, and Luden's Echo. I'll be a pretty squishy champion, but do a massive amount of damage. If somebody makes the mistake of stepping into a brush that has multiple saplings, they're going to get 100 to 0'd by a support champion. If you want to be more of a true support, you could take that core build, add the Ionian Boots, then a Redemption, Locket, and Knight's Vow. It's an okay build that does work, but honestly, if you want to be a true support, you shouldn't really be playing Maokai, honestly. In my opinion, you should be abusing the enemy as much as possible with some saplings, so don't go for support. But that's everything I've got for support Maokai. Don't forget to check out the video description below for a link to all my social medias. I stream every night but Tuesday at 7 PM Eastern now, and of course that link is down there. As is my Discord server and my second YouTube channel. Also, if you guys did enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, but other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I will see you in the next one. Take it easy, have a good day, and peace.